Well, I managed, with the help of matches, Barcelona, some restaurant or bar that no longer exists, maybe it exists, who knows, with a match and a votive candle. No prayers were offered, though. I managed to take this section out of this pen, and as I said, I had one of these bands which was missing on the pen when I got it on eBay, and then I put a sack on it and I wrote with it, and it didn't write. It wrote upside down for some reason. It did this, but it didn't write going that way, and I couldn't understand why. I thought every once in a while I'll get a pen where the tines are just pushing together so much that it takes a lot of pressure from little old me to move them apart enough so a molecule of ink can be put onto the page. And I thought maybe that's the problem, so I pulled the nib out a little bit, thinking maybe that might help. Sometimes it does. With certain pens, there's that balance I talked about in some earlier video. And I took it completely out, and I thought, well, I stick another nib in there from a different pen that's broken, and I'll be happy. But I looked at it under my loupe, and I learned something every day. Well, I learned something this morning. So under the loupe, here you see the tines. Here's the breather hole. And there was all sorts of fucking... Oops, can I say that on YouTube? I did say that this is this is not for children. There was all sorts of stuff in the breather tube, breather slit. The breather hole is here. Sorry, the slit was full of crud, gravel, and so I got a piece of paper and I put this in between the tines. It was out of the pen at the time, and cleared it out, and it works fine now, more or less. I don't understand why it worked going upside down and it didn't work going this way, unless there was a boulder stuck on this side of the... I mean, it worked a little bit if I pressed down a lot, but it just... Anyway, I fixed it. This is something that normally doesn't get clogged, so it's something that maybe if I have a 51 that doesn't write, maybe that's why, because there's boulders in the gutter there. So anyway, this pen is one of those Waterman Taperites that very few people like, and I like them for a number of reasons, mainly because they're almost like writing with a 51, except they have a flexible nib. So if I sort of blur my eyes, I can almost pretend it's a 51. But even if 51s never existed, would this pen make sense to have been built? Let's pretend the Parker Company went bankrupt in 1935, and the Waterman Company continued, and they came up with this plan for some reason. Would I like it? I'm thinking. I don't know whether I would. I would think it would be a giant step backward for Waterman, because of the fact that it's taking what's really fun about Watermans often is their flexible nibs, and you're making a nib that doesn't have the flexibility that a normal nib has. Now, Parker 51, on the other hand, because it made a nib that was invisible, essentially, you know, it's at the end of that, get your electron microscope out and you can see it. That was sort of stunningly amazing how that was a pen. This is less, because you can see it, you can see the nib. It's less stunning. So if this existed without the 51, I might think it was dumb. But because it's trying to copy the 51 and they did the best job they could, they ended up with this thing. But look at the nib, look at the line it can make. It can make a flexible line, and very few Parker 51s can do that. Make a varied line that's as varied as this one. So the other reason that I like this pen is generally most pen collectors don't like these. So they put this in their, quote, junk box. And I can usually buy them inexpensively. And inexpensively used to be, back 30 years ago, might have been $10. And even then, most pen collectors would think, why are you wasting $10 on that pen when you could be buying an Esterbrook? Or you could be buying a Parker 21 or something with your $10. Why are you buying that pen? Well, because it has a gold nib and because it can be somewhat flexible. Nowadays, you can't find any gold nib at a pen show, even in a junk box. They don't have junk boxes anymore because there's way too many people that have way too many tastes, and this pen might be one of them. So no one really has a junk box. My friend Jeff Krasner has, quote, junk boxes. He describes them differently. He never uses the word junk. They're fixer-uppers, or he does use the word schleg to describe some of the pens that need a little bit more TLC than he's willing to put into it, and maybe even I am not willing to put as much TLC into this thing as I could. Most of the pens in those boxes are pens that either require way more complicated repairs than I can do, or they don't have gold nibs, or they don't have nibs at all. And anyone that has a gold nib pen will not sell it cheaply anymore because the gold is worth something. Anyway, so what's wrong with this pen other than it's an attempt to copy the 51? Well, I've got many videos about this pen and why I like them and why I don't. But today I was reminded of one of the reasons that I don't like it. And here are the two reasons I don't like this pen. One is it's very difficult getting the section out of the barrel because there's nothing to grab onto. With a normal fountain pen, this Waterman, for example, you have this flared out end and your fingers can sort of very gently lift out. You're trying to go that way. In order to go that way, you sort of have to rock the thing very gently. Or you can rock it very gently. And but you've got most of your pressure is being pressed against the outer curve of that, and you can grip it. On this pen, your fingers slide off, or your pliers slide off, or your whatever slides off, and it causes you to get angry. So that's one of the problems with this particular pen. The other related to that is sometimes these pens have slight incised lines that are curved or that are at an angle like that, and that requires you to sort of slightly twist them as you pull them off, or it helps if you twist them as you pull them off, but you don't know unless you have x-ray vision whether these have that or not. So you might be twisting when you're not supposed to be, or you might be pulling without twisting when you're supposed to be twisting. So you can break things. Connected with this section ectomy is the fact that the barrels are brittle, so they crack. So that's a problem, even though it's divided up into reasons that that problem exists. That the section ectomy that has to happen in order to fix the pen has that. So anyway, I put the sack in the pen, I cleared out the thing, and it's writing fine. I put ink in the pen, and now I'm as happy as can be. And I thought, oh, yeah, this is rather nice. And I went like this, found this thing off a pen. It was missing that, and I got ready to take it off, and I did that, and I thought, what the fuck? And look at what happened. The thing that was missing on the pen was there all the time, but it was shoved into the cap. And that's a flaw of this in this design, is that this ring, which is set on the edge between these things, and it's placed on top of this, it fits onto a little collar of the barrel. It's not glued on, it's not secured on, it's just set there. And this is set on into it. But for some reason, the inside diameter of this is larger than the outside diameter of this. So you do the math. If you shove this thing on really tight and you pull it off, this can sometimes go with it. And that was a flaw that is unique to this pen. The other ring that they made later on, actually, cross-section looks like this, so it can't come off like this one can. So they learned their lesson at some point to fix that. This looks like the 51, has the same sort of three-stepped thing. The reason that this doesn't slide off is that this section hood shell, it's called shell, is screwed on to the barrel, and it holds this thing in place. It's not just friction fit and you cross your fingers, because that's doesn't work. When you're crossing your fingers, you can't write with your pen, can you? I guess you can, ineptly. So anyway, I learned something today, is when this is missing, check inside, look under the hood to see if it's there, and that sometimes the inner channel has boulders in it that have to be removed. Normally, I don't check for this because it doesn't happen very often, but it was happening in this case. So now I've got this pen, and I'm happy with it. Yes, it's a 51 ripoff. It's a Waterman Taperite. And Taperite is spelt entirely wrong. T-A-P-E-R. Now, is it Taperite? Is it Taperite? No, it's Taperite. Now, which is the stupidest way to spell this? You got it. So, anyway, I kind of like it. There's a certain robustness to this style of cap that I don't appreciate in their aluminum versions. This it just seems light and sort of flimsy. Here's the later style. See, that works. this seems sort of light where this seems robust, and it's not just because this is bigger. It's just there's something. The lever is also bigger fatter on these earlier ones. This just seems like they were cheap. Yet there's something I like about them too. I mean, as you know, you've dealt with me before. My mind can change in mid-sentence, mid-word, I bet. Anyway, I'm running out of, I don't have any black ink. I need to get some. Now we have liquor stores, pharmacies, grocery stores, and pen shops. I think those are the ones that are allowed to be open. Is that true? It should be. Anyway, there we go. So this was a success. Yesterday's was a mistake. The pen that I broke yesterday on camera, I haven't uploaded it yet, but I will today. I will show the accident as it happened in real time. It turns out the pen, in addition to having the flaws that I did not see when I was bidding on it, it also has something that I don't like. As you know, I'm not bothered by certain flaws, cosmetic flaws, but it has a cap, and the cap has a little chip out of it, right at the tip of the cap of the pen. And I thought, oh, shit, what's that I didn't see? And it looks like this part had broken off and been glued back on. So whether that was done by the seller or someone in 1939 or some other time, I don't know, but that bothered me more than the warping. So anyway, the nib in it is good. I will put the nib in some other pen. Maybe it'll fit in this one because I took this one out to go in my other pen. It might fit right there. It might make this pen happy again. This pen is a off-brand pen made in Japan, and it has a nib, head and nib that I've moved over to here. And my new best friend, BFF, best friend forever. Look at that nib. This is a Schaefer nib, which was in that Japanese pen because I put it there. It doesn't belong there, but look at this. There's a line that I'm making. Exactly the kind of nib that this pen has. This is just so delightful. This Eversharp, because of that nib. If it didn't have that nib, it would be a lot less delightful, in my humble opinion. This pen is working out fine. I'm not in love with this nib as much as I might be with this one. Oh, no. Let's try the nib in here. What is this one like? This one has a slightly finer fine, I think, when you flip it over. I don't know if it's just because of the black ink. I think it's just because of the black ink. They're similar. It's funny though that, let's pretend the nibs are similar, and let's pretend that they have the same amount of ink, or the same color ink in them. What is the difference between the two? This is lighter than this. It's a little tiny bit shorter. Just a little tiny bit shorter. Cap is a little shorter, the pen is a little shorter. But it's really, really light. The aluminum cap just makes it lighter. And it's different. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it's just different. And maybe I need to be blindfolded. And once one of my friends, Ted Clausen, who's a brilliant artist and calligrapher, and he's a pen whisperer. He knows more about the personality of pens than I could ever pretend to know. He told me once that he could tell the difference, blindfolded, between gold, 14 karat solid, and gold fill, and sterling. And by just holding them and feeling them in his hand. And I didn't believe him. And I thought if it's true, I will worship him. But I gave him a test. I blindfolded him. I gave him a solid gold pen and a gold fill pen and a sterling pen, and they were all sort of different sizes. You couldn't tell by the weight. It was more the feel, he was telling me, and he got them wrong. None of them were correct. So maybe if I gave him that test 20 times over and he got them right 18 out of the 20 times, I would believe him. But I just stopped because I didn't think it was possible, and I don't think it's possible. Now maybe by smelling them you might be able to tell. Silver tarnishes, and maybe tarnish has a certain smell to it, so that might give that away. Or not. God. Anyway, here we go. Put this away, Pierre. You fixed it. I've got a lot to do today, and I got up at 3 o'clock. Crazy dreams. And I've got a lot to do today. And bending this Q-tip into that shape was not on my list of things to do, but I can now say that I did that. I did one thing today. Fixed a pen and bent a Q-tip. Got ink on my fingers. Bye.